Critical Thinking in Small Group, Chapter 7. So, what is creative thinking? Enhance group creativity. What makes thinking critical? Enhancing critical thinking in a group. So, what is creative thinking? So, problem solving in small groups involves two components: creative and critical thinking. Creative thinking encourages the use of hunches, intuition, insight, fantasy to promote creativity. Group creativity involves divergent thinking, produce different ideas, convergent thinking, identify the best ideas. So, when you think of the creative thinking, uh, realistically, this is, people who usually have some type of experience in a certain field. So when they're having hunches, having insight stuff, they've already had some skills, training, and education, and worked in the field for a while. So when they have these hunches, intuition, and insight about stuff, it's something that makes sense. I'll give you an example. Somebody who's never worked in the field. Let's say someone who's a social worker, and you put them working with engineers. Well, their creative thinking is probably not going to work because they're not working in their field. So you're going to have some folks who's going to be working in areas where they have some background, some stuff where they have these hunches and whatever else. And a lot of times these things are based upon experience and training. The group creativity involves divergent thinking, produce different ideas. And this is where having diversity in the group, people where, to look at things different and think different, where it comes together. And the convergent thinking is when they come together after they've done the divergent thinking and start identifying the best ideas as a group. So if you got 15 ideas that came up, you want to will it down and try to come up with the best 4 or 5. What is creative thinking? Creative groups are diverse. Creative groups structure their discussions to enhance create potential. A group's climate contributes to creativity. A group's creativity is impacted by the environment. So when we look at the creative thinking, the groups are diverse. One of the things is this is one of the reasons why when you look at diversity and the type of people that you have in there, and this is one of the reasons why it's important because it's going to start there. And these creative groups, they structure their discussions to enhance creative potential. People are actually going to be talking and bouncing ideas off of each other and basically get the creative juices flowing collectively. A group's climate contributes to creativity. So if they got a good climate where they're working, and it's not necessarily physical, but it's also mental. If the climate is good among them, that promotes creativity. And the creativity is impacted by the environment. What type of environment do you have, man? For instance, did you put them in a place that's conducive for somebody to sit down and try to think? Or did you stick them somewhere where, for instance, they're right next door to a bunch of machines that make noise, or by the railway station, or by the cafeteria and stuff? Little stuff like that you have to think about. Individual, group, and environmental factors for creativity. So we look at members, groups, and environment. Members, willing to communicate, willing to be unconventional and violate norms, tolerate ambiguity, not afraid of rejection, open to new ideas, playful and have fun. So this is where, when you say letting creative juices flow, these people are willing to communicate and they're willing to violate the norms and stuff because realistically, when they're trying to be creative, they can't condone to the norm. They got to be willing to think about things that others might say, oh, that's crazy. That'll never work. When you're in the creative process, this is what you will do. Tolerate ambiguity. Listen, there might be things, like, okay, not sure about this, unsure about that. We don't know about this. That's fine. You don't know, but you can find out. You can endeavor to find out. Not afraid of rejection because worst thing can happen when somebody tell you no or somebody tell you it won't work. It means I can eliminate that now from the drawing board and you can go on to find something that does work or something that they will say yes to. New ideas. There's no such thing as too many new ideas. And playful and have fun. Keeping things light so people don't get stressed. And therefore, Listen, if you can get people to do this type of stuff and they enjoy it, it doesn't feel like work to them. It feels more like something that might be like a passion. Groups have diverse knowledge. So when you have these diverse people in there, they've got diverse knowledge, and that's strength. Do not let somebody tell you that the best way to have a group is to hire a bunch of people who all alike. Now, I'm not talking about look alike, same race, the same gender. I'm talking about people who think alike. Overcome norms that interfere with creativity. So if you got norms and you're solely abiding by the norms as a group, that's going to be a problem. And there are some people who they really like to operate that way. And I will tell you, they view people who don't operate that way as reckless. Develop appropriate group climate. What type of climate do you have? Do you have a climate that's conducive to promoting teamwork? Create people not afraid to be able to be daring. Environment. Place high value on creativity. Give the group autonomy. So when you look at the environment, place high value on creativity. You know, in other words, there's no such things that you can say to me that's crazy. Because there's always a possibility, the way I see it. And I want you to do those kind of things. And you got to give them autonomy. If you don't give them autonomy, and I'll give you an example. You got a group, you've asked them to be creative, you put them on a project, but they're answering to 2 different managers. And the managers are not, they're totally different, but neither one of them are actually what you would consider someone who would operate in a creative manner. You just killed that group because they're not going to let them be loosey-goosey, be creative, and operate without autonomy. They're going to be checking in on them every day. They're going to hold them accountable, and not hold them accountable, but they're going to make sure that they're not doing things that they see as wasting time and everything else. And it's totally counterproductive to what it is you're trying to accomplish. Enhancing group creativity. Brainstorming can be used to release a group's creativity. Preview rules for brainstorming. A problem is presented. Members generate solutions without criticism. All suggestions are recorded for the group to see. Ideas are evaluated at another session. Guidelines for brainstorming are important. So when you're talking about this brainstorming, you know, it's very important you sit down, and one of the first things you do is preview the rules for brainstorming. You know, what's the groundwork? What's the rules? And then looking at these problems and let people be able to generate solutions without criticism, because if somebody says something, you say, oh, that's crazy, that'll never make sense. What do you think they're going to do next time they come up with something? They're probably not going to say it or won't tell you. And that's what you don't want, you know. So write down all the suggestions so everybody can see them, you know, like on a board. Ideas are evaluated at another session. And, you know, there'll be a time and place to do that. But having guidelines for brainstorming is very important because it's a process. It's not haphazard. Enhancing group creativity. Synetics, a procedure designed to stimulate creative thinking by using metaphors and looking for similarities in different things. The following questions help trigger such insights. Change your perspective. Look for a different comparison from another field. Temporarily suspend reality and use fantasy. So again, if you've got the wrong kind of manager over a group, these are the kind of things that they would not be saying. If you've got the right type of person, you've got to create a group, but you've got a creative person that's managing them, or somebody they've given them autonomy to go unmolested by managers constantly getting involved and dipping into what they're doing. These are the kind of questions right here that would be statements that will be said, and sometimes questions that will be asked, because again, you're trying to get people to think, look outside of the box, think outside of the box. The second aspect of problem solving is critical thinking. Critical thinking involves the use of evidence, the use of logical arguments. So critical thinking occurs when a problem is analyzed thoroughly using much relevant information as possible. So see, this is not a hunch anymore. This is not a feeling. Now we've got some evidence-based stuff that we're using. We're making logical arguments to try to come to some type of conclusion or whatever else, solve an issue or create something. And there's always been precedents been set. You can use those and find evidence. Give you an example. What if you're working on an endeavor within a company and two other groups over the last 5 years also worked on it, but they both failed? You know what I call that? I call it evidence. I call that stuff that's useful. Here's why. Because we know what they did don't work. So now those are things that we don't have to do. The most important technique is attitude. Several attitudinal components are important. Being open-minded and willingness to consider new information. Skeptical individuals want to think for themselves rather than being told what to think by others. Critical thinking is an active process of tested information. Tested information is by asking each other probing questions. So when you look at it, you want these people to be open-minded, and they're skeptical, but that can be a good thing. They want to think for themselves. And what they don't want is a manager or somebody else telling them what they need to think or how to think or how to do something. And this process, is, and they ask each other questions. I call it playing devil's advocate. I used to do this with some of my colleagues. They play devil's advocates and they ask questions and stuff, because here's what it's hard for us to do sometimes. It's hard for us to think like other people. So when you ask other people, how would you look at this? If you play devil's advocate, what kind of questions would you ask me? And then you'll find out like, wow, she just asked me something I never would have thought of. But that's a good thing because now you can prepare for it. Groups must organize ideas in order to think critically about their problems, which requires members to gather information, assess information needs, evaluate information, check for errors in reasoning, avoid groupthink, gathering information, collect resources, direct observation, reading, the internet, electronic database interviews, and other things. So when you're enhancing that critical thinking, you're trying to gather information, access as much information as possible, and you want to evaluate that to see is it something that you can use, and you also look for errors in your reasoning. Are you looking at something with wishful eyes and stuff, and you're seeing something that's not really there? Well, this is what happens having other people around you. This right here is something that is critical. Avoid groupthink. Groupthink will derail a project. It'll kill a project. Groupthink is when everybody's pretty much thinking like the same way. We're going, because one person said something, she's the most powerful person on the team. So everybody else starts to kind of chime in and kind of starts thinking like her because they're following her lead. Don't want that. Totally counterproductive and will not work in the long run. And of course, gathered information for all types of sources that you can. Evaluate information. Okay, you want to determine the meaning of what is being said. Distinguish fact from opinion and inference. Identify and clarify ambiguous terms. Determine the credibility of the source. Assessing accuracy and the worth of information. So here's what you're doing. You're vetting the information. You're vetting the information and you're asking all these questions because you have to make sure what it is you come up with, it will stand up to the test of time and it's actually something that makes sense or it will work. So these are the things that you have. These are the questions. These are the statements, the questions that you have to ask yourself and your team members and your group members. Checking for errors in reasoning. Avoiding fallacies, which are mistakes in reasoning. Over-energizing. Attacking a person instead of the argument. Confusing casual relationships. Either or thinking. Incomplete comparisons. So errors and stuff, when you look at these things, all these things come into place. Fallacy. Overgeneralizing and stuff. Is it something that you're making something, oh, this is overgeneralized, this is too easy or whatever else. And realistically, it may not be. But you can act like that or you can say that. And here's something we really have to be careful of. And this is very easy to happen. Attack a person instead of the argument. Meaning if you say something that I don't necessarily agree with, I don't attack what you said, I attack you. That's one of the ways you destroy group cohesiveness pretty quick. And you'll start having people who don't want to work together if you have that going on. Confusing casual relationships. When you're looking at this different types of things and stuff, does it have a casual relationship or does it have a strong relationship? When it comes to trying to get something done. And either or thinking, you know what? Not either or thinking, it could be all types of possibilities. Don't have to be one way or the other. There could be multiple opportunities in different ways for something to work. And incomplete comparisons is basically when you're trying to draw some conclusions and you're looking at some things and you don't actually examine enough or look at enough or have enough data to make some competent comparisons. Therefore, it's incomplete. And if someone else was to ask you certain questions or to check what it is you're doing, they would probably see that. And here, avoiding the groupthink, which is a failure to critically think and leads to flawed decisions. So symptoms of groupthink. Remember I told you that's a killer. Overestimation of power, morality, closed-mindedness, experiencing the pressure to conform. So overestimating power, morality stuff is looking at, thinking that you have more that basically you're Superman or you're Superwoman. Or the group is. And what we can do is we can do anything. We can walk on water. And realistically, no, because we're all men and women. So we got to make sure that we keep our heads level about that. Closed-mindedness. I'm only willing to think about certain things and see things in a certain way. I'm not open to some other ways of doing stuff or some new ways. Experiencing the pressure condone. Now that's when you have members in the group that's pressing you or somebody else in the group to see things their way or say things their way or do things their way. Preventing groupthink. Kick the problem around. One of the things is this: when you think of preventing the groupthink, kick that problem around. Let people. Let's say if it's 10 people in the group and you really, really try to prevent it. Let's say we're gonna go to each one. What do you think about this? And see what they have, and see how it's going to be different or whatever else. Establish norms of critical evaluation. How are you evaluating something? It has to be some type of process that you evaluate. It's not a hunch. It's not a gut instinct. It's not haphazard. It's got to be some type of process that you can actually do that, come up with a critical evaluation. Prevent leaders from stating their preferences at the beginning of a group's decision-making or problem-solving issue. If the leader stands up and says, this is what I would like to see happen, bam. Guess what a lot of people in the group will probably try to do? Make that happen. And that's not what you want. Because see, that may not be how that something naturally would work or would work on its own. Prevent insulation. Bottom line is this: you don't want to get so insulated from others and people and thoughts and ideas that, it's just you guys. You want to have interaction with other people. You want people to come in sometimes, to break the monotony. So prevent insulation, where you're just insulated and isolated by yourself and not having interaction with others, because it's healthy. Even though they may not be working with you, but it is a healthy thing to have others who can be involved and just touch bases with periodically. That concludes this chapter.